up with some geography, we got Lake Nyos. How can a lake kill 1,700 people? Well, though it sounds too insane to be true, it did indeed happen. Located in West Africa, the lake itself is deceptively beautiful. However, on August 21st, 1986, a mysterious cloud burst from the lake. It flooded towards the village and suffocated 1,700 people and animals. Nothing survived the event. The reason this happened is because beneath the water there is a pocket of magma that leaks carbon dioxide into the lake. The CO2 stays dissolved in the water due to the pressure of the 650 feet of water on top of the magma secretions. Crazy, so kind of like a pop bottle with an invisible lid. Until one day, that lid popped. On that day, the lake abruptly depressurized and the CO2 exploded into the air, causing the devastating event. Today, pipes are used to siphon the CO2 out from the bottom of the lake in order to prevent this from happening again, but imagine when it did happen, it must have felt like some kind of magical grim occurrence. For sure. Number 9. The Salem Witch Trials. If you follow me on MA, you just know how much I hate the Salem Witch Trials. I hate them so much, okay? It's an event in history that is so inconceivably stupid, it's hard to believe it actually happened. The Salem Witch Trials occurred in Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693, where more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 20 were put to death. It all started because the daughter of Reverend Paris, Elizabeth, who was 9, and his niece, Abigail Williams, same age, started having fits. Another girl, Ann Putnam, age 11, started having them as well. The supernatural was blamed and soon the girls began accusing everyone they could, mostly people the town didn't like. Basically, if you confessed and you wanted to be saved, then you weren't executed, but if you were accused and didn't confess, you were killed. The paranoia was so bad that once you were accused, you couldn't escape this guilt they put on you. It was insane. But after the paranoia finally subsided, the colony admitted that they probably made a mistake and compensated the families. Like, yeah, oops, might have gotten a little carried away there. Wow, whew, I got excited, sorry guys. Here's some money. The Salem Witch Trials today represent what happens when paranoia rules a courtroom and the whole thing still beguiles the world even 300 years later. Number 8. Unsinkable Sam. On a happier note, this is the kind of story that makes people believe that cats have 9 lives. Unsinkable Sam was the nickname for a cat who survived several shipwrecks during World War II. His tale begins aboard a German warship called the Bismarck. Among the 2,200 soldiers was a black and white cat that somehow snuck aboard. One day, the Bismarck was decimated during an attack, and while the HMS Cossack was looking for survivors, they saw Oscar the cat, name at the time, seeking refuge on a plank, like Jack from the Titanic. They hauled him aboard, but then several months later, the Cossack would be decimated. That's shipwreck number 2. This time it was the HMS Ark Royale who spotted him and was then dubbed the name Unsinkable Sam. And then, shipwreck number 3, months later, as you can guess, the Royale was torpedoed, and once again, Sam was saved by the HMS Legion of the British Royal Fleet. Finally, this seafaring feline retired to land and later died in 1955.
At number 7, Valentinian the First. You know when you see someone get really mad and a lot of the time there's that one vein in their head that just pops out while their face turns red? Well, that thing unalived someone once. That's right, a person once got so unbelievably angry that they died. Roman Emperor Valentinian I was known to be a pretty hot-headed guy, and during his monarchy he had rivals in Danube called the Quadi tribe. Valentinian was very invested in this rivalry and they were in constant conflict with one another. In November of 375 CE, Valentinian received a note from the Quadi tribe demanding that they be left alone in peace as they supplied new troops to the army of Rome. On top of that, some Quadi troops also claimed that this whole feud between them and the emperor was because of the Roman forts that were built on their land. They even claimed that because of this, they weren't obligated to follow any of the terms of the Roman treaty and that they could attack whenever they wanted. As you could imagine, hearing all this stuff from his rivals really ticked off the emperor. He got so mad that he started yelling at Quadi agents, and his yelling was so intense that a blood vessel in his brain ended up bursting and he passed away shortly afterwards.
Number 6, the Great Emu War. I thought this event was a joke for like a very long time, but like many on this list, it actually happened. It all started in 1932 when a large emu population began devastating farms. Many of the farmers were ex-soldiers, and after the devastation persisted, petitioned for military aid to defeat the pests. Keep in mind that emus can grow as tall as like 6.5 feet and have really sharp claws. They're fierce. We didn't know how fierce until the Minister of Defense, George Pierce, deployed troops and expected to eradicate the pests, I don't know, very quickly. But they were in for a surprise. They vastly underestimated these killer cunning birds, as they soon proved impossible to hit with machine gun fire. They just like barreled forward like Superman getting hit by bullets. Like it didn't even matter. They would get hit and then just keep running. They were so fast that even their vehicles couldn't keep up with them. It's so funny. Within a week, the military gave up and they killed only like 50 to 200 emus out of like 20,000 of them. George Pierce earned the title of Minister of the Emu War. What a way to go. Eventually they did try again later that November, which resulted in 284,700 deaths of emus between 1945 to 1960. But dang, that is some pest control. But we all know that girl on TikTok who has like emus and she like puts her hand out when they try and hiss at her. They needed her. She would have just like dummied the whole population and they would have followed her like the Messiah.
At number 5, atomic tourism. If you could do anything or go anywhere while on vacation, what would you do? Maybe go on a cruise or visit a tropical destination, but how about go and watch bombs get tested? Well, if you were around in the 1950s, then atomic tourism might have been one of your options for entertainment while on vacation. In the 50s, the US was expanding its arsenal of nuclear weapons due to the threat of the Soviet Union and their nuclear firepower. Because this was such a big thing, the Tourist Bureau of Las Vegas decided to profit off the US military's weapons testing and make an entire attraction out of it. Because testing for these nuclear weapons took place in the desert in Nevada, a tourist site was set up a safe distance away so that people could watch these weapons be detonated, as well as have a beautiful view of the Nevada horizon. People would bring picnics to watch the nuclear weapons, and at nighttime they would throw parties while they waited for the next explosion. It's such a weird tourist attraction, but then again, the 1950s were also a weird time anyway.
Number 4, Agent 355. So they are actually making a movie inspired by this one because of course it would make a great movie. Move over 007, there is a new agent in town and I smell an excellent film legacy brewing. After a hasty retreat made by George Washington leaving more control in British hands, he needed to come up with a stealthier way to retaliate. Thus, the Culper spy ring was born. This intelligence operation was so good at keeping secrets, some of the identities of the spies were never revealed, especially the identity of Agent 355. Not even Washington himself knew who was working for him or who was 355, but we do know that they were a female agent, a spy of expert skill. It was because of her that the head of England's intelligence, Major John Andre, was arrested. Notoriously handsome and debonair, 355 could have been any of the women that fawned over him at parties, gathering his secrets. One secret in particular was his plan to sell West Point to the British. After documents pertaining to his ordeal was uncovered, he was arrested and condemned. But as to who would be directly thanked for this capture was unknown. The only other suspected fact about her was that a female spy was reportedly killed on a prison ship in 1780. Of course, there are theories regarding her real identity, but Agent 355 was so good at her job that who she was and what else she did would be taken to her grave.
At number 3, Crispus. You know how when you laugh really hard, you start gasping for air and your stomach starts to hurt from tensing up your body so much? Well, this once killed someone. A Greek philosopher named Crispus actually died from laughter. In the 3rd century BCE, the philosopher laughed so hard because he saw his donkey eating figs, and then he kicked the bucket, so to speak. According to science, death by laughter can occur because of asphyxiation, because you just can't breathe because you're laughing so hard, or through an aneurysm because of the tension from laughing. What's so wild about this is the fact that this wasn't the first time in history that death by laughter has happened. It is said that Cleopatra's father died the same way because he was laughing at the death of her husband, and a 5th century Greek painter met the same fate because he laughed too hard at one of his own paintings. And a Danish audiologist passed away in a similar fashion in 1989 because he saw a funny scene in a movie that raised his heart rate so much that he died.
Number 2, the first marathon. The Battle of Marathon is one of the most famous Greek battles in history, and it's also epic, and I also can't believe it happened because it's so cool. Back in 490 BC, the Greeks faced off against the invading Persians on the plains of Marathon. It was a victory that would go down in history as a testament to courage and excellence. But it wasn't only the battle itself, but a man named Phidippes whose actions were so insane, some people think it was a myth. He was sent to enlist the help of Spartans before the battle, so he ran to Sparta but stopped in Athens first. The total distance was 240 kilometers, like there and back. I can barely make 4 kilometers, imagine 240 kilometers on foot. He wasn't just like a basic guy though, he was what was called a hemerodromos, a sacred day-long runner in the military. They were known for covering incredible distances by foot, even foregoing sleep. They would most likely have consumed figs and cured meat, like that's it. His journey inspired the marathons run today, and even some have tried to make the exact trek he did. Meanwhile, it's a struggle for me to even do like a half-hour workout at the end of the day.
And finally, at number 1, Robert Liston. Robert Liston was probably the worst doctor in the history of medicine because he messed up so bad it is unbelievable. This surgeon in the 1800s performed a surgery that had a 300% mortality rate. So he went in to help someone and ended up killing 3 people as a result. Liston was performing a simple leg amputation, but was working so fast that he ended up cutting off 2 of his assistant's fingers during the procedure. Both the assistant and the patient ended up passing away after contracting gangrene. Now you're probably asking yourself, well, what about the third person? You said this had a 300% mortality rate. Well, let me tell you how the third person perished. During the procedure, Liston swiped near an elderly doctor with one of his blades. Thinking that he had been cut, the doctor started freaking out and went into shock. The stress was so much that the doctor ended up having a heart attack and passed away. So in the end, Robert Liston killed 3 people trying to save 1 life and failed miserably.
Number 10, Amelia Earhart. An American aviation pioneer and celebrated figure in the early 20th century, Amelia Earhart was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Notably, in 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean, covering a distance of over 2,000 miles from Newfoundland, Canada to Northern Ireland. Beyond her aviation achievements, Earhart was a prominent advocate for women's rights. She encouraged women to pursue careers and goals that were traditionally considered to be male-dominated. Earhart was also an author and a popular public speaker, which I wish I could do, and she wrote several books about her experience in aviation and women's issues. In this photo, what seems to be a normal photo of Amelia is actually the last photo we have of her before she went missing. She may have survived her round-the-world attempt only to be later captured by Japanese forces. According to a newly discovered photograph, and according to the New History Channel documentary, the photo is found in a National Archive file as it has shown Earhart alive after her plane fell low on fuel during her mission. The photo depicts a woman believing to be Earhart and a man who looked like her navigator, Fred. A Japanese ship can be seen in the background, carrying what appears to be her plane, as her fate has been debated for decades and has sparked several conspiracy theories. What do you guys think? Or are people just hopeful? Number 9, Volcano. We all love a good nature tour or park hike, but for this man, David Johnston, he really loved the nature of volcanoes and geology, and ultimately pursued his education in the field. He was working with the US Geological Survey at the Cascades Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, and he was assigned to monitor the activity of Mount St. Helens, a stratovolcano that had been showing recently a lot of activity. This photo is when he was doing his research on the earthly giant, but tragically on May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted explosively, triggering a massive landslide and a pyroclastic flow. David Johnston was stationed at the observation post on the ridge known as Coldwater 2, about 6 miles north of the volcano. He radioed in the now famous message, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it!" to his colleagues at the USGS headquarters, alerting them to the eruption. Regrettably, Johnston's post was directly in the path of the advancing pyroclastic flow, and he perished in the eruption alongside with many others. His body was unfortunately never recovered, and he was only 30 years old. Number 8, the 1986 Challenger. I love space, and I think space is really amazing and cool, as so did these guys, the crew members of the Challenger: Francis R. Scooby, Michael J. Smith, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Christina McAuliffe. The Challenger mission was unique because it included Christina, a civilian schoolteacher who was selected to be the first private citizen to fly in space as part of NASA's Teacher in Space program. However, the Challenger suffered a massive disaster when the failure of an O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. Cold temperatures in the morning of the launch weakened the O-ring's elasticity, allowing hot gases to escape and damage the external fuel tank, leading to an explosion that was witnessed by millions of people around the world, and it was a devastating blow to NASA and the space program. Following the disaster, the space shuttle program was suspended for over 2 years, and significant changes were made to the shuttle's design and launch protocols. After its investigation, the disaster also led to a renewal focus on the importance of safety in human spaceflight.
Number 7. Nelly Bly. Nelly Bly is a woman right out of a Jules Verne novel. In fact, you would think so if she hadn't met the man himself. In 1889, Nelly Bly took on a record-breaking voyage by traveling around the world in just 72 days. Her means of travel included a train, a steamship, a rickshaw, horse, and donkey. Her goal was to beat the fictional record set by Verne's hero Phileas Fogg in his 80-day Odyssey. An event like this already appeared as a myth to the men of the time. Her editor at the New York World nearly refused to send her because her gender would make the trip impossible. No one but a man could do this, he told her. Very well, she replied. Start the man and I'll start the same day for some other newspaper and beat him. He backed down, and eventually Nelly was on her way, turning fiction into reality. Number 6. The Black Museum. No, I'm not talking about the Black Museum episode of Black Mirror, but honestly, not too far off. People have done some pretty vicious things to their enemies. There's a long list, but imagine turning your enemies into a permanent dinner guest. Because that's exactly what Ferdinand I of Naples actually did. Though everyone thought he was going to be a great king, he actually ended up being pretty psychotic. He would invite his enemies over for dinner, and while they gorged on pheasant, he would take them out, either the old-fashioned way, or literally throw them out of a window. He would then retrieve and dress the bodies and stage them. He called it his Black Museum and would invite new acquaintances to view it so they would know exactly who they were dealing with, so not to mess with him. What a psycho! Number 5. Sir Adrian Cotton de Walt. Love that name. There are going to be a couple unbelievable events on this list from World War II, so just a heads up. But truth be told, the war itself is kind of hard to believe. Sir Adrian Cotton de Wart was not only a man who survived the impossible once, but he made a career out of it. He wasn't like your Blackadder general in the back with a pipe. This dude was on the front lines tossing grenades with one arm because he already lost the other. He served in the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. He survived being shot in the face, skull, hip, leg, ankle, and ear. One eye and one arm short, this enthusiastic war hero dove into the bloodshed again and again. He was seen pulling pins out of grenades and throwing them with his one good arm during Battle of the Somme. But even as a 60-year-old man, he was still a beast. His plane got shot down in April 1941, he crashed it into the Mediterranean, survived, swam all the way to shore, then he got captured by Italian soldiers, thrown into a POW camp, then he escaped, eluded capture for 8 days, but unfortunately the lack of Italian looks gave him away. He was released 2 years later, and Churchill was such a big fan of him, he made him his rep over in China. He ended up passing away peacefully at age 83. Despite hundreds of close calls with death. Number 4. Simo Heha. This is actually kind of a plug for a short film I'm looking to raise funds for. Check out my Instagram to learn more. But his story is incredible and it's so unbelievable. Simo Heha's story sounds like something straight out of a movie, except it actually happened. A humble Finnish farmer who became the Soviets' nightmare in World War II. He's widely regarded as one of the most accomplished and skilled snipers in history. The Winter War began in Finland in 1939 after Russia decided that it was time to regain some territory. They thought it was going to be easy. But soon they came to fear the man who would be known as the White Death. He was trained as a sniper at a young age, didn't want to take human lives though, so he just became a farmer, but the lives of his countrymen were at stake. The Winter War lasted just over 100 days, and within that time, Simo hit as many as 500 men, his personal best being 40 confirmed hits in one day. Some people estimate that it was over 800 people. In March 1940, he was hit in the jaw by a counter sniper, leaving him in a coma for 11 days. But when he awoke, however, the Russians surrendered. That is poetic justice. Number 3. Alexander the Great. How did this guy exist? Was he the son of Zeus? The case is so convincing that even Alexander believed it himself. During the 15 years of his conquest, starting from his first victory when he was 18, Alexander never lost a battle. He was so prolific in battle that his strategies are still studied to this day. Before Alexander entered Egypt, they had been under Persian rule for just over 200 years. Through his incredible prowess and lightning-quick decision-making, Alexander defeated them. Egypt was so happy they even claimed him as their pharaoh. While he was in Egypt, however, Alexander decided to make the long trek to visit the shrine of Zeus Ammon. According to the man himself, he was guided there by ravens, and it even rained during his journey, which was interpreted as a blessing. When he got there, the priest named him a son of Zeus. Now, if that doesn't make this guy sound like a myth, then I don't know what will. Number 2. Boda Boda. Boda Boda is the Morrigan in my mind. She is Xena, warrior princess. This woman was so ferocious, she was called the scourge of the Roman Empire. Yeah, that's right, this queen took on the Roman Empire. At the time Rome was invading the south of Britain, Queen Boda Boda ruled the Iceni tribe of East Anglia along her husband King Prasutagus. Though her early days remain mostly a mystery, she remains among the canon of heroes who defended the British Isles. She was fearsome to behold, with flaming red hair and a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. She and her husband fought against the Romans until his death, after which the Romans drove straight to take her on. They attacked her daughters publicly, which, like Mother Bear, not a good idea, after which she toured in a chariot rallying the people in rebellion. She sacked 3 Roman cities and took no prisoners. She annihilated the 9th Legion when she took out their entire relief force. Sadly though, Boda Boda fell after a vicious battle, but her name echoes in the halls of heroes. And last but not least, Richard, Saladin, and the Third Crusade. Just the Crusades in general are just unbelievable. Never in history have 2 rulers been so equally matched. Currently I'm reading Warriors of God, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin and the Third Crusade by James Rustin, and the fact that everything I've read so far isn't just the next Game of Thrones novel astounds me. These 2 never met because Saladin believed that kings should not go to war if they had met, but because they were fighting over the Holy Land, war was kind of inevitable. But while Saladin did not engage in warfare, Richard dove right in the middle of everything. They both had such incredible admiration for each other that in the middle of battles, they would send each other gifts. I don't understand. You killed my men. You killed my men. Here's a fruit basket. Literally happened. And another example, during the Battle of Jaffa, Richard's horse ended up being killed, and Saladin was so impressed with him that he sent him 2 new ones. 2! On top of that, Richard had taken off half of his armor before he had leapt ashore to fight. So he was basically half naked. Eventually Saladin tried to have him assassinated, but Richard was so ferocious in battle that everyone feared him.
Starting off with S for secrets. Alrighty, so here is from the Polish Constitution Day celebration in Chicago, specifically the one from 1978. On the left there, all washed out and crappy old flash display style, is First Lady Rosalind Carter. The guy shaking her hand, or rather just holding it and staring off camera like a waiter just went by with a tray of warm sausage rolls he wants to really get into, is John Wayne Gacy. And if you're also thinking, yo, what is up with this guy being in so many random famous photos, you're absolutely right, and it's genuinely strange how photographed and out there Gacy was. By the time this was taken, he had already killed over 20 people. Also, when he wasn't side hustling as a clown, he was super active in the government and politics, thus why wearing the S on the lapel. It was given to him by the Secret Service to indicate special security clearance. So the S literally does stand for secrets, both the US government's and his own. Whose secrets are worse though, huh? Anyways, at the bottom of the handshake photo, you can see the handwritten address to John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter. I've heard beauty is pain, but I haven't heard beauty is the next Saw movie? Check out the Beauty Calibrator. Seeing pictures, you may think it's some sort of Middle Ages torture machine, or as said, literally one of those Saw movie head devices. But surprisingly not, it's another way to point out women's insecurities and find the smallest things possible to make them feel bad over. Meet the Max Factor Beauty Calibration Machine. It is the only one in existence, thank God, and in 1932 the makeup legend Max Factor came up with this ingenious invention combining phrenology, cosmetics, and insecurity gaslighting with pseudoscience analysis of a woman's physical flaws. Max Factor's Beauty Calibrator enabled Hollywood makeup artists to pinpoint where facial corrections needed to be made down to a literal fraction. The machine, also known in the trades as the Beauty Micrometer, revealed that a natural perfect face was a myth. Every single woman was imperfect and needed correction, and this machine could find behind it by taking precise measures. It would mark spots that needed to be fixed, and then the artist, once the helmet was removed, could correct all the new insecurities with makeup that you didn't have before you put the stupid thing on. Next up is a photo that's all dramatic flair, the death card. Masiria represented an outdated mindset in the mafia world, one that could no longer be reasoned with diplomatically. The same is true of his rival Marandano. The ongoing tit-for-tat killing between the two genuinely wreaked havoc on not only the streets but in the mafia hierarchy itself. Those resistant to change generally don't last long, and meetings of the mafia elite tried to bring around at the end of bloodshed, but Marandano especially consistently manipulated matters to his own advantage. In order to facilitate underworld peace, the consensus turned from diplomacy to the inevitable. One of these guys had to go. The final straw, according to the account of Nicola Gentile, was when the police informants called Masiria and said knock off the violence. Having an idealism for peace, he actually responded by disarming his men, and they were all pissed. Joe the boss, Masiria, his bodyguards, and Lucky Luciano all met at a seafood restaurant at 3 p.m. on April 15th of 1931. Luciano excuses himself from the card game while that they're playing to visit the bathroom. This is the signal for the hitmen. The bangs could be heard from around the block apparently, as Joe was hit from behind 4 times in the back and 1 in the head. And it's born, the infamous Ace of Spades shot. It added to the cult status of this hit, but many expect that the Ace of Spades card was placed between Masiria's fingers after the hit by a photographer just for the shock factor of the press.
Number 7. Menendez Brothers. We're all fans of something, whether it's art, music, or sports, and for the Menendez Brothers, they would be so excited to see that they happen to be in the photo card. But the most disturbing part of this photo is the fact that these two killed their parents before the photo was even taken. They went on a 6-month spending binge with their money. The case was so shocking to the media, including how after the deaths occurred, the brothers went to watch James Bond's License to Kill and tried to use it as an alibi. How a week prior their mother confided to her therapist that she was worried that her sons were psychopaths, and how one brother brought an entire chicken wing restaurant with the parents' money after they had passed away. Their father was an executive in the entertainment industry and both went into private schools, and the older brother Lyle was briefly enrolled in Princeton. After 2 deadlocked juries, LA prosecutors retired the brothers in a courtroom that did not allow cameras, and the new jury found them guilty on 2 counts of the first degree. They were sentenced by the judge to life in prison. Number 6. Aquino. Filipino people have been known to fight resistance against imperialism and oppressors, as that seems to be all of our history to be composed of, and that is the truth. And for Nino Aino, he was opposing threat as the political activist against the long dictatorship and assailant of the martial law, Ferdinand Marcos. He tried to run for president in 1973, but then Marcos declared martial law in 1972, preventing him to run. Benigno Aquino, or as we know by his nickname Nino Aquino, was imprisoned by the Marcos regime for speaking out against him, where he was locked in prison and tormented for 7 years. It wasn't until he suffered a heart attack did Marcos' wife Imelda allowed him to go to the United States to get treatment, only under the condition that he does not come back home to the Philippines. But Aquino knew that his love for the people and the Philippines was more important, as there were many people wrongfully prosecuted or just be found dead on the street for protesting against Marcos. He did plan to go back, and before he arrived to the Philippines, he warned reporters, hey, this might be the last time you ever actually speak to me, and he was right. In this photo was the photo before he left the plane out towards the Philippines airport. He kept saying he had a bulletproof vest on, but the assailant shot him in the head. There were countless reporters that day that knew something was going on, only for them to be all shocked to see his body on the ground. There's even footage of his assassination online, and his death sparked an outrage throughout all of the Philippines asking for justice. But of course, the United States always has to get involved in something, and they were able to get the Marcos family out of persecution from the very people he tormented and controlled for years. Number 5. Tyler Hayley. Everyone likes a good party selfie, including Tyler Hayley, who we can see here drinking a party cup with some friends. But what they don't know is that if they walked into the master bedroom was the killed bodies of his parents that he ended moments before the party. Tyler allegedly decided how he wanted to commit the crime a few weeks prior to committing them. He often told a friend exactly what he was planning to do at the time, noting that having a big party after a parricide had never been done before. Shortly after noon, Tyler wrote on his Facebook wall, "Party at my crib tonight. Maybe." Around 60 people attended the party at that night, and several had alleged to have noticed the smell of dead bodies. Gross. During the party, Tyler apparently told several people about what he had done. Tyler went on a short walk with a friend and Michael Mandel and confessed the crime. After returning to the party, Mandel discovered the bodies of Blake and Mary Jo in the master bedroom. Mandel did not leave the party immediately. In fact, he had continued to spend hours with Tyler and even took a selfie with him, which is what we see. 4 hours later, Mandel left the party and called the local crime hotline to report the incident, which is pretty smart on his end, because if he did something, then, Tyler would have done something to him. News of the crime was then spread by word of mouth, and Hayley was arrested early in the next morning. Number 4. Tankman. When it comes to revolution, all it takes is one person. After all, a single grain of rice can tip the scale. The Tankman photograph was taken on the morning of the 5th of June, 1989, the day after the Chinese government had violently suppressed protests in Tiananmen Square. An estimated 10,000 civilians were killed in the massacre following weeks of a student-led demonstration in Beijing and beyond against the communist regimes and the suppression of basic human rights and freedom of expression. The image captures a lone man standing in the middle of the Chang'an Avenue just off the square facing down a column of 4 slowly advancing Type 59 tanks of the Chinese army in a defiant protest. The identity of the Tankman still remains anonymous as people don't know what happened to him after, but he has been noted as a notable figure in the stance against militia harm to the people. Number 3. Jolie Kalin. When it comes to love, if you know something is off, listen to your gut and be safe first. Unfortunately for Jolie, she only left one memory to a friend that something ever happened to her, they know who the cause was. In 2015, 18-year-old Jolie Kalin was hiking with her ex-boyfriend Lauren Bunner when he photographed her on a cliff before he pushed her off of it. The 20-year-old killer nearly escaped justice by claiming he was on the autism spectrum in court. This is the exact photo before he pushed her off. Bunner later called the cops and said, "I just want to turn myself in for the crime of my ex-girlfriend that happened just a little while ago on Heha Mountain." Later that evening, on August 30th, 2015, police found her body still wearing her backpack. Cops believe that he had lured Callahan, who still wanted to remain friends with her former boyfriend, there to kill her because she wouldn't take him back. The court heard him bragging to cellmates about killing the 18-year-old, saying if he couldn't have her, no one else could. Number 2. Omagh. If you're lucky, you may have had some cute outing photos with your family and friends when you were younger, and this particular photo seems like an ordinary day with a young girl and her dad, but unfortunately it was actually moments before an explosion incident caused by the real IRA, or the Real Irish Republic Army, a provincial Irish Republican Army splinter group who opposed the IRA's ceasefire and the Good Friday Agreement signed earlier that year. The explosion killed 29 people and injured about 220 others. The red Vauxhall Calvaire containing the bomb, can I say bomb? The red Vauxhall Calvaire containing the explosion. This photograph was taken shortly before the explosion, and the camera was found afterwards in the rubble. The man and the child in the photo both survived, and the injured survivor, Marion Radford, described hearing an unearthly bang followed by eeriness, a darkness that had just come over the place, then screams as she saw bits of bodies' limbs on the ground while she searched for her 16-year-old son, Alan. She later discovered he had been killed yards away from her after the two became separated just minutes before the blast. And finally, number 1, Andes. Personally, one of the most creepiest photo, and it actually made me feel pretty uncomfy with this one. Seems like a cool crew cut photo of just a bunch of dudes, when in reality these are the survivors of an Air Force Flight 571 crash in the Andes. Pilot Ferradas had flown across the Andes 29 times previously, and on this flight he was training a co-pilot, La Guara, who was at the controls. As they flew through the Andes, clouds obscured the mountains, and the controller in Santiago, unaware the flight was still over the Andes, authorized him to descend to 11,500 feet. The rugby players on board joked about the turbulence at first until some passengers saw that the aircraft was very close to the mountain. That was probably the moment when the pilots saw the black ridge rising dead ahead. After the crash, of the 45 people on the aircraft, 3 passengers and 2 crew members of the tail section were killed when it broke apart. The survivors had little food, only 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 small jars of jam, a tin of almonds, a few dates, candies, dried plums, and several bottles of wine. Eventually their friends made an agreement that if they ever died, they would offer themselves for them to eat, and so they did. The group survived by collectively deciding to eat flesh from the bodies of their dead comrades, and in the photo you can see on the right, a spine. At the end, 8 people were rescued and they lived.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Mad Bomber. This is a photo that was taken of someone known as the Mad Bomber. His real name is George Metsky, and he was the man who terrorized New York City for 16 years while he planted explosives in public places like an absolute psychopath. I guess he was apparently angry about a workplace injury he had suffered in the years prior to his terrible crimes, and so of course the normal reasonable jump to make would be not that at all. While no one should have ever had to suffer because of these crimes, the good news is that while he planted 33 bombs and set off 22 of them, miraculously only 15 people ended up injured in the end. This photo of him behind bars is extremely eerie thanks to his creepy smile and haunting eyes. I might be the only one who feels it, but it just seems like something's off.
you know? In our number 9 spot today we have the figures of the fire. This photo is both extremely unsettling and super captivating as it shows a scene after the Great Fire at Madame Tussauds in 1925. Of course, this wax museum is famous for the extremely lifelike wax figures that are created and find their home there, so you can only imagine the aftermath of the fire. These lifelike figures with missing heads and appendages, burnt skin and hair, and just clothing in disarray. Seeing this photo for the first time without knowing the story behind it was definitely a bit of a confusing and terrifying experience. The heads on the ground really freaked me out for a full 5 seconds. As scary as it is, I'm glad to hear it's not real and just some creative casualties rather than what this photo appears to be at first. In our number 8 spot today we have the Spectre. This is a photo that was taken in England in 1963, and it became known as the Spectre of the Newby Church. That is, of course, because of the ghostly figure that can be seen in the photo. I personally am always a little suspicious of ghost photos. Some are certainly more convincing than others, but Photoshop in 1963 wasn't exactly as accessible and easy as it is now. This photo is said to have been taken by Reverend K.F. Lord inside of the Newby Church, which is located in North Yorkshire, England. Of course, I mean, like many of us are going to do, people were really skeptical of this apparition and just believed it was a well done case of double exposure, which, to be fair, is entirely possible. The Reverend continued to swear up and down, however, that the photo was not doctored, so at this point, there's no proof to prove either side, and it's just a game of he said, she said. So, what do you guys think? Apparition caught slipping, or is the Reverend just making it up?
Next is a series of photos recovered before they could be lost. Holes in a window. Former LAPD reserve officer turned photographer Merrick Morton was faffing around in the LA Police Department when he comes across a stash of LAPD crime photos ranging in the dates of 1920s all the way to the 1970s. These were cellulose nitrate based film, and the negatives were so decomposed they're deemed fire hazard, but Merrick saw enough of the few stills to know that they'd be an absolute effing gold mine. Working with Phototeca Photo Digitation Service and the US National Film Archive, the photos were given a new life. This collection is NSFW and there are hundreds. Now spruced up, the macabre photos are mostly crimes and many of them violent and depicting the bodies or surviving victims' injuries. Obviously the ones you're seeing on screen as I'm talking are tamer, such as my choice, the one you're seeing now, holes in the car window. Something about it gives me a deep sense of discomfort, thus the choice. The collection contains recognizable crimes and faces too, an unusual photo of Malaya Nurmi dressed as Vampira, pictures of comedian Lenny Bruce's OD in March of 1966, and images of the Manson family arriving at their arrangement in 1970. Every photo is scary and every single has a disturbing backstory. Some captions are provided by author James Elroy in his book LAPD 53. You can win, but sometimes you still lose in the end. It's the devastated Disneys. Meet Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. There are some everyday photos of these two in their prime. Who were they? In case you couldn't tell by all the Disney crap in the background of said photos, they played somewhat of a big role. You know, writing the lyrics and music for Oliver and Company, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast, as well as a few others. Also, not to mention creating the Little Shop of Horrors, which got them hired by Disney in the first place. And in this photo you see now, they had just won the Oscars for The Little Mermaid. Hooray! But why does Ashman look so unhappy? This was his life's accomplishments. It's because that night Ashman told Menken they needed to have a serious talk when they got back to New York, and when they get back a few days later, Ashman admits that he has HIV that's quickly progressed and he's going to die soon, and fast. They had been songwriting partners for over a decade and were in the middle of working on Beauty and the Beast, and despite the illness, Ashman completed the lyrical work and the initial work on Aladdin. On the morning of March 14, 1991, he does die from heart failure caused by his condition. At the time of his death, he only weighed 80 pounds, he'd lost his sight and could barely speak, and a voice that spoke so eloquently through song was lost forever. Before he passed, however, Disney Productions scrambled to finish the film so he could see a screening of it. The film earned Ashman and Menken 3 1991 Academy Award nominations for Best Song, and the title song winning the award. Perhaps most amazingly, Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Motion Picture. So it looks like a photo of two men achieving their wildest dreams, but it's a record of their last normal moment together. Oh look, it's the D-Bags Day Off! Camp staff! Check out this jolly-go-lucky group. They got the day off of work because the weather was nice for the first time in a long time. During the wartime, that must have been awesome, especially being young. Finally shirk responsibility, maybe go get a pint, have a picnic, hang out with each other, maybe get a little frisky, lavishing in the sun. I'm done looking at them. In fact, I'm sick by having to look at them. When that group of people is gonna have lighted and silly summer fun on a day off, they're going back to their jobs at the camps of World War II to do exactly what you're thinking they would be doing for work when I say they work at the camps of World War II. And they enjoyed it. This wasn't one of those mandatory war jobs or excuses you can make up for following orders. These young adults, who may as well be the grandmothers, grandfathers, or great-grandma or pa of people even watching, chose to do this job and actively enjoyed it. So this is a good reminder it's not that far in the past, and these people most likely took lives shortly before or after this photo was taken. Did Halloween come early, or is it just Sylvester Claws? Yeah, so I chose this photo out of, trust me, like thousands of equally creepy ones because I feel it truly captures the what the bleep factor this holiday has. And they do it every 31st of December to 13th of January. The Sylvester Clausen of Ernach and the surrounding area Appenzell custom that is famous throughout Switzerland. The custom derives its charm from the unique blending of contrasts such as nature and art, mystery and tradition, harmony and anarchy. The Sylvester Claws that ushered the old year out and ring in the new. There are three types of these clauses: the beautiful, the ugly, and the pretty ugly. Common to all the clauses are bells in various shapes and sizes that they wear on their bodies. Their rituals begin in the early morning each day. The various shupel meet at the village square before each group goes its own way. A group will pull up in front of your house, then hop around and jump up and down to make the bells ring, and then they start yodeling at you. You listen to the yodel, they say Happy New Year, give you some cash, some liquor you have to drink from a straw, and then they just leave. Dark backstory gossip, however, in times of poverty and hunger, which afflicted the region frequently, Clausen was a way to earn a little extra money, and in the 1930s, what was known as Belchel Claus, aka the beggar claws, began to appear on the streets. Essentially homeless Santa Clauses, but Santa looked like that. As a result, the influx of beggars in the Claus Guide resulted in heavy restrictions, and in the 1950s, the custom had nearly died out. It's only thanks to the initiative of individuals in the 1970s that this got to come back and enjoys enormous popularity today. Somebody come get their creepy uncle. Cannot tell me this isn't the energy this photo gives. Creepy uncle. The woman is unidentified, but definitely a follower to be able to handle that guy's BO and greasy hands on her. It was taken of the Children of God leader, David Berg. This group started in 1968 in California after Berg claimed God himself had gifted him with prophecies. In reality, Berg started making extreme demands of his followers, give up their money, worldly possessions in exchange for limited outside access, horrible cramped living conditions, brainwashing, and would make this group famous for really bad reasons I can't and would rather not get into. Former members of COG have been outspoken about the childhood they suffered growing up in the communes. Actress Rose McGowan, the most famously outspoken, published her story of 9 years in the group. Actors Joaquin and River Phoenix, also raised in the cult, had it harder than Rose, and that trauma plagued River especially. He was actually the original heartthrob of the 80s and 90s, a role, fun fact, DiCaprio only managed to take once River's substance addiction caused by his traumatic childhood unfortunately took his life. So more of an unfun fact, but the matter stands that River painted the way for DiCaprio, and this psycho ruined a lot of people's lives. Have you ever seen a photo you can feel? Before you see the photo itself, you're gonna learn about the man in it. So, Joseph Goebbels, a National Socialist politician and propagandist who held multiple high-rank roles in the Yahtzee party. As a party chief for Greater Berlin, 1926 to 45, Reich leader of propaganda, 1929 to 45, and in 1933, the push-broom mustache twit appointed Joseph the Minister for Propaganda and Public Enlightenment. He was a devout, unbridled through and through bigot, a tireless agitator, and the propaganda this man designed, wrote, and funded had shipped through dozens of countries and shaped the perspective of Jews in a way that can actually never be undone. It's this propaganda many people still cite when asked for factual basis or logical argument as what Jews had done oh so wrong. It's Joseph who orders the mass burning of literature, who sentenced thousands to death, and who made up lies to ensure hatred, a hatred that still stands today. And I want you guys to see how he looked at them. So here is the photo, finally. This is a picture of Joseph Goebbels taken only seconds after he found out the photographer was Jewish. In this photo, you can feel it, and it's effing terrifying. And now, the last photo is from El Monte, 6 May. That's the date written on this photo from the LAPD Collective, and it's the only other photo from said collection I chose to put on this list aside from the holes in the car window. As follows is the photo and James Elroy's written description of it. This is a detective modeling a mask worn by Baxter Shorter's crew. Shorter was in a gaggle with Emmett Perkins, Jack Santos, and Barbara Graham. The three of them then killed an old woman named Mabel Monahan on 9 March 1953. Shorter was appalled by his gaggle's violence. He ratted the others out, and Santo and Perkins kidnapped him in front of his pad on Bunker Hill, took him to the mountains, and killed him. Shorter had a sister that lived in El Monte, and they were hunting through it for evidence. This mask was in her pad. James Elroy. If Mabel Monahan's former son-in-law Tudor Scherer hadn't been a Las Vegas gambler, the 60-year-old widow probably would have never been killed. Also, if she didn't stay friends with him after he divorced her daughter, that'd probably have helped. But she did, and people found that weird. So there had to be something at play, right? Maybe Scherer trusted her so much he stored his 100-grand floats there. Ex-cons Emmett Perkins, John True, and Jack Santos think that, and they plan to take it. Barbara Graham joins the group to be their key into the door. Mabel takes a while to open up, but Barbara persuades her with the story of a broken down car and pleas for the phone. Mabel was reluctant, but the young woman was alone, and the widow knew firsthand how scary it could be for a woman to be on her own at night, so she let her in. And in comes John True, Jack, Emmett, wearing rubber masks. We're gonna take a pause. Ladies and female presenters, our own sex does not guarantee our safety, and you can't predict anyone's intentions. Please trust your gut if it says don't open that door. Mabel is struck on the head, left gagged and bleeding in the hallway. The group ransacks her home for a safe that never exists and panic when there is none, so they just leave her there. Mabel is dead for 2 days in her home before she's found. The investigation into the slaying of the Burbank widow began, and it was a long one, filled with drama. In the end, the four are charged with conspiracy to commit burglary, robbery, and M-word on June 3rd, 1953, in the death of Miss Mabel Monahan.
Number 10, we will get out of lockdown. I don't know, maybe? We'll see. I think so. I'm starting this one as number 10 because I literally cannot believe we are here. I just got my second dose and it was officially 2 weeks last Friday, so hugs are a-coming. And I remember feeling even a few months ago that this would never happen. Researchers estimate that over 9.5 billion doses of the vaccine will be administered by the end of 2022. That means that for weddings, school, restaurants, libraries, work without masks is going to be in our future. With the Delta variant still at play, there is the possibility of other precautions being put in place, but still, if not by 2022, then eventually. The vaccines can protect against it, so as long as we keep doing our part to keep each other safe, we are on the way, babies. I'm gonna hug so many people. Maybe even you, or you, Chris. Number 9, the Sagrada Familia. One of the largest and longest construction projects will finally come to an end. Antonio Gaudi's masterpiece began construction in 1882 and has had nine architects take over since. It is called the Sagrada Familia Church and is located in Barcelona, Spain, or Badalona, as they say in Vicky Cristina Barcelona. I love that. Badalona? Jordi Folli and his team will be the last people to ever work on it. The pure extravagance and luxury of this building is overwhelmingly breathtaking, but why on earth has it taken so long? Well, the original architect died in 1926, there was the Spanish Civil War, the original project was destroyed, and lack of funding. The majority of the project was privately funded and subsidized. The designs that Gaudi laid down are also incredibly complex, with each layer and brick containing intricate details. He wanted to build the highest church in the world, and that it will be, with the central Jesus Tower reaching 172.5 meters. But finally, after 150 years of construction, the church will finally be complete in 2026. If everything goes well. You never know. As we found out in the last 2 years. You just never know. Number 8, the triple Jovian eclipse. Some really cool things have already happened these past few months, and there's plenty more to come, so don't you worry. The next Jovian eclipse is set to happen in 2032. What is that, you ask? Well, 3 of Jupiter's largest moons, Io, Ganymede, and Callisto, will align across the planet's surface like a couple of cool space polka dots. Yeah, we'll call them that. Jupiter has 16 moons in total, and the 3 mentioned are among the biggest in its orbit. The last time this happened was in 2004 and was caught on the Hubble Space Telescope by some miracle. The event happens so quickly, and this time scientists are hoping to capture the event in sharp detail, so stay tuned. Watch your Google.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Tsar Bomba. This is a photo that was taken on October 30th, 1961. It was quite the Halloween spooky fright that year, as this is said to be the largest and most powerful nuclear nuclear weapon ever created and tested. The hydrogen aerial bomb was developed in the Soviet Union by a group of nuclear physicists that were under the leadership of Igor Kurchatov. The bomb was dropped by parachute and was detonated autonomously. While this test was meant to be a secret, turned out to be less than well kept, as it was obviously a huge explosion that was detected by United States intelligence agencies. A secret US recon aircraft called Speed Light Alpha was there monitoring the explosion, and it got so close that it had its anti-radiation paint absolutely scorched off. The photo clearly shows the bomb as it exploded, and it is said that this bomb was 5,000 times stronger than the ones that were dropped on Japan during World War II. That's not to say that those ones weren't strong, because they were absolutely devastating. It's just an example to show how large this one really was. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Three Jacksons. On August 21st, 1934, three fearless acrobats known as the Three Jacksons, Charlie Smith, Jewel Waddick, and Jimmy Kerrigan, all performed a routine on the edge of the Empire State Building, which is when this photo was captured. It is said that these three toured as an acrobatic trio, and this stunt the photo captured was done at 1,245 feet. According to officials from the Empire State Building, it is said that this was the first time the stunt was attempted, and to this day, it has never been done again, which makes a lot of sense. While this photo is absolutely incredible and is such a testament not only to the trust that they shared but also their abilities as acrobats, I don't know who in their right mind would try to recreate this. We already have one. I think we can just all be happy with that. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Gentleman of Rae. This photo shows the Gentleman of Rae, and that is not a gentleman and instead is the world's oldest surviving diving suit. It is an absolutely terrifying sight, but also an important pillar that allowed for this kind of technology to develop to what it is today. The suit dates back to the early 18th century, but it came to find its home at the Rae Museum during the 1860s after it was donated. The suit was initially designed to allow people the ability to check the hull of ships without having to bring them into dry dock. The old gentleman is made mostly of leather with pitch thread used to stitch the seams. From here, the suit is sealed with more pitch, and then to create the waterproof coat, it is covered in a mixture of mutton tallow, tar, and pitch. Of course, underwater pressure increases dramatically, and this is why there's also wooden framework in the hood in order to keep it from collapsing under the pressure. At the top of the hood, there is an opening for a wooden air pipe. The air would be pumped to the diver, then it could be released from the suit through a pipe on the backside. Of course, this means that the suit wasn't completely watertight, so divers could only go under for a short period and couldn't dive very deep because there was only so much pressure the suit could take, but still, the suit was far better than having no suit at all. In our number 4 spot today, we have ectoplasm. This photo is said to have been taken in 1910, and it shows a medium in the middle of a spiritual seance. I don't know about you, but a 1910 seance sounds like an absolutely terrifying time. This photo is said to be catching the moment that ectoplasm appears out of the mouth of the medium. When we're talking about the occult and the paranormal, ectoplasm is a viscous substance that exudes from a spiritual entity, or sometimes the earthbound medium who is connected to or communicating with the spirit. It is said that this substance can take the shape of a face, or a hand, or a complete body, and it's usually seen in a darkened room during a sort of seance, and this is the way that the paranormal can physically manifest themselves in our world. So basically, what I'm saying is that this is supposed to be the moment that an evil entity is making themselves known in our world. Thankfully, at the end of the contact with the spirit, the ectoplasm will usually disappear as it returns to the entity, so it hopefully didn't stay around long, but this photo sure is something. In our number 3 spot today, we have the isolator. There are tons of strange inventions from the past. We have entire lists and videos dedicated to the strange inventions. There's so many. And while this is one that can be added to the list of bizarre inventions, it can also be added to the list of creepy ones as well. This photo shows what was meant to be a sort of anti-distraction contraption from the 1920s. Listen, I can get easily distracted, so sometimes I need a little help, but this thing really takes it to a new level. It essentially makes it impossible for the person to look at anything other than what is directly in front of them, or, you know, breathe. It seems like a contraption that requires an oxygen tank hookup probably isn't going to be the best anti-distraction device. In fact, I think that's probably more distracting than anything. Honestly, I'm such a good procrastinator that even with this thing, I still wouldn't get my work done. Thankfully, this device didn't stick around or gain much popularity, and now it is just a terrifying relic of the past. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Great Manta. In 1933, a New York silk manufacturer named A.L. Kahn was on a nice little vacation vacation in Florida when he honestly accidentally caught something remarkable. His anchor line, by mistake, caught onto a giant manta ray. After a struggle and several hours, Khan was able to get this actually enormous fish ashore. This monster was somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 pounds and was 20 feet and 5 inches in width. For reference, there are other giant manta rays, but they usually grow to be around 13 to 14 feet wide, not 20 and a half. This photo is showing a taxidermy version of the fish, which Khan used to bring around to exhibitions to show off his accidental catch. In an article from December 10th, 1933 of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's Sunday magazine, Khan is quoted as saying, "Fishing is a lot of fun when you catch the fish, and sometimes it's fun even when you don't, but when the fish catches you." And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the advertisement. This is a photo that comes to us from the time of World War II, and it shows a very terrifying kind of ad. The sign reads, "These men didn't take their atabrine," and at first I had absolutely no idea what that was. Turns out that atabrine was actually the first synthetic form of a drug which was used by the US military to fight malaria in the South Pacific during the war. It is estimated that as many as 2/3 of the troops fell ill with malaria. The sign is said to have been posted outside of a military hospital in New Guinea and was meant to serve as a warning for those who didn't take the medicine, warning that the skulls on top would be the fate that awaited them. Perhaps a little dark, but creative and likely effective nonetheless. At the very least, the ad is definitely quite clear.
Kicking off our list at number 10, the Pioneer's Defense. Right off the bat, yeah, look at this one. I don't have to explain why it's creepy in any way. A whole town appears to be wearing gas masks. Yeah, you could probably guess which era this is. This image was captured in 1937 by Russian photographer Viktor Bula. Adapting to new safety regulations these last few years have been challenging, no doubt about that. But in 1937, if you wanted to join the Young Pioneers, which is the Soviet version of the Boy Scouts, well, you had to wear these huge gas masks and part of military preparation. Yeah, welcome to Boy Scouts. Grab a button and then put this vacuum cleaner on your face. Enjoy. Break a leg. It's gonna hurt your back a bit. This photo is haunting. It's from the Leningrad area, and it happened while dictator Stalin was still in charge. These masks are so haunting to look at. We see them after the fact, but to see them being worn in real time in that photo, I don't know. Maybe this photo gets me because we can't see anybody's faces or ages. Right? Makes you paint the picture yourself. Either way, let's move on to some clown stuff, shall we? Number 9, 1910 clowns. Yeah, they existed back then, and they were much worse. Here's a fun fact, I didn't know this, but back in 2016, a study was done, and it turns out Americans fear clowns more than they fear death. Mind you, this was at the height of the clown craze back in America, but a poll was conducted by the Morning Consult in 2016, and it shows that 42% of Americans said they were in some capacity afraid of clowns. 42%. So if this is you, you may want to skip to the next one. I'll beat you there, no problem. This photo is from 1910, and it appears to be a jolly good time, right? 2 clowns for the price of 1. Nice, what a great deal. Let's go. Now what's terrifying about this photo, I'll admit, is that the clown on the right is much larger than the clown on the left. If you have a fear of giants, well, you're screwed here, really. Nowhere you can go. Just a tall clown and a little clown. There's clowns everywhere. I don't like clowns. Number 8, Analise Mikel. If you've seen or heard of the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, this one here should ring a bell. This is the OG photo. How scary is that? Analise Mikel was a devout Catholic living a normal life with her parents in Germany. This was back in the late 1960s, but seemingly out of nowhere, she began to black out before showing strange behaviors. And when I say strange behaviors, I mean she would hallucinate and eat spiders. Stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty scary. It was also extremely unhealthy, but ultimately Annalise claimed to be possessed by the devil, and her parents soon had to agree. Cut to 67 exorcisms later, Annalise sadly died of malnutrition at age 23 in 1976. And like I mentioned at the start of this point, her story was so widely known and shocking that it eventually inspired the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I have seen, and it is very scary. All real, turns out. Sleep in fear.
Number 7. We might live forever? I don't know. Put down the Botox and